The calendar read February 11th, 2007, a Sunday afternoon in Memphis, Tennessee. At a guitar repair shop on South Main Street called Lyle's, a man in his 60s had been sitting at the workbench since 6 in the morning, doing something he had not been asked to do and would not be paid to do, and could not stop himself from doing anyway. His name was Percy Lyle. The shop was named after his father, who had opened it in 1969 and who had died in 1991, without ever knowing that the work he left behind was going to take his son 30 more years to finish. The door was unlocked. It was always unlocked on Sundays, even though the sign said closed. A man in a mustard yellow linen shirt was going to walk through that door in 40 minutes. But first, a younger man was going to say something that the room was going to remember. South Main Street smelled of river air and old brick, and the faint chemical sweetness of lacquer coming through Lyle's open transom window. The morning light came in sideways, low and gold, catching the sawdust on the floor and the tools hung on the pegboard above the bench and the guitar bodies in various states of assembly or disassembly that lined the shelves like patients in a waiting room. There was a single space heater in the corner that clicked every 4 minutes whether it needed to or not. There was a radio on the high shelf playing a gospel station at a volume just low enough to be ignored. Percy Lyle was 63 years old. He was a large man with hands so calloused they had their own geography, ridges and valleys that a doctor would have had trouble distinguishing from scar tissue. He wore the same thing every Sunday: dark canvas trousers, a gray thermal shirt, the same pair of work boots he had been resoling for 11 years. He wore reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead when he wasn't using them and down onto his nose when he was, which meant they moved constantly and he never noticed. He was working on a guitar that had belonged to a woman named Iris Beaumont. Iris had been a music teacher in the Memphis public school system for 34 years. She had retired in 2002. She had never owned a guitar worth more than a couple $100, and the one on Percy's bench, a 1971 Martin D28 with a cracked top seam and a warped neck block and a finish that had gone to gray along both edges of the body, was not worth more than that in the market's current opinion of it. Iris had bought it in 1977 at a pawn shop on Beale Street for $65 and had taught 314 students on it over the next 25 years. She had not been able to play it herself for 8 years, first because of the arthritis, and then because the guitar had developed the crack and she had not had the money to have it repaired and had not wanted to ask. She had not asked Percy. He had seen it sitting in the corner of her living room when he came by to fix her radiator in November. Iris was his mother's oldest friend and he still checked on her every few weeks, the way you check on people when there is nobody else left to do the checking, and he had asked about it without making a big thing of it. She said it was broken. He said he would take a look. He had brought it to the shop and set it on the workbench where he could see it every day. And for 3 months he had been deciding what it needed and acquiring the right materials and doing the work in the early morning hours before the paying jobs arrived. He had not told Iris he was doing it. He was going to tell her when it was done. That was the plan. He was fitting the last section of the top brace when the bell above the door rang. The young man who came in was named Joel. He was 24, in Memphis for the weekend visiting a college roommate, and he had come through the door because he had seen the guitars in the window, and because he played a little himself, and because the door was unlocked on a Sunday, which he took as an invitation. He wore a jacket with the collar turned up, and had the particular confidence of someone who has recently learned enough about a subject to be certain he knows most of it. He looked around the shop with the expression of someone appraising something. He ran a finger along the edge of a guitar body on the shelf without asking. He picked up a bridge pin from the small tray on the counter and turned it in his fingers and set it down somewhere that was not the tray. Percy looked up from the bench. "Help you with something?" "Just looking," Joel said. He was already moving toward the wall where the finished guitars hung. He stopped in front of a handmade archtop, Percy's own work, 5 months of Sundays. Spruce and flame maple inlaid rosette, a thing of serious beauty. "This yours?" "Made it," Percy said. Joel looked at it with his head tilted. "You do repairs too?" "Repairs. Setups. Some building." Been doing it since '81. Joel nodded slowly, still looking at the archtop. My dad's a big Clapton man. I grew up on Clapton. He said it the way people say things that are supposed to establish a credential. I've been getting into some of the other guys, trying to expand, but I keep coming back. Hard to argue with Clapton, Percy said. He meant it. Somebody at the bar last night was going on about Santana, Joel said. He had moved to the next guitar on the wall, a battered Strat that needed a neck reset, and knew it. I've never really gotten it. I mean, he's fine, but people act like he's in a different category. I think he's overrated, honestly. Technically, Clapton is just a better player. More versatile. Percy said nothing. He set down his tool. He took off his reading glasses and cleaned them on the hem of his thermal shirt and put them back on. He looked at the Martin on the bench. He looked at the door. He did not say what he was thinking. What he was thinking was about his father. Oliver Lyle had opened this shop in 1969 with money borrowed from a deacon at his church and a toolkit he had assembled over 12 years of watching other men work. He had never taken a lesson, in music or in luthery. He had learned both the same way he had learned everything else, by putting his hands on the problem and staying there until the problem gave up its secret. He could hear an intonation problem from across the room. He could hear the difference between a guitar that was alive and one that was technically correct. He said once that a guitar was like a person. It had a character, and if you forced it to be something other than that character, you got noise that looked like music. His son had not understood what that meant until he was 45 years old. Oliver had played guitar every evening after the shop closed. Nothing formal, nothing performed. He would sit in the chair by the space heater and play the same songs his own father had played in Alabama before the move north. Not north to Memphis, but the earlier move. The one that put the family on the right side of the river when it mattered. He played for 40 minutes every evening, and then he put the guitar away and did not play again until the next evening. He died in 1991 with a project unfinished. A parlor guitar he had been building for Iris Beaumont's music program. One he had promised and not been able to deliver, because his hands had gotten ahead of his heart at the end. Percy had found the unfinished body in the back room when he cleared out the shop. He had finished it himself over 3 months and given it to the program. He had not told anyone whose work it started as. He had told Iris once when she asked about the parlor guitar years later. She had held his hand and not said anything. That was enough. He was thinking about all of this when the bell above the door rang again. The man who walked in wore a flat black hat pulled low to his eyebrows and a mustard yellow linen shirt and silver bracelets and a turquoise ring on his left hand. He was 60 years old. He moved the way people move when they have been in many rooms and have stopped needing to announce themselves in any of them. He looked around the shop without hurrying. He looked at the tools on the pegboard. He looked at the space heater. He looked at the gospel station radio on the high shelf for a moment longer than he looked at anything else. Nobody paid him any mind. Joel was still at the guitar wall. Percy was at the bench. The man in the hat walked to the bench. He looked at the Martin. He stood with his hands at his sides and looked at it the way you look at something you are trying to understand before you speak to it. Top crack? He said. Seam separation, Percy said. Bracing underneath was pulling away too. Fixed both. The man leaned closer. He did not touch it. He looked at the bracework through the sound hole. How old is the guitar? 71. He stood back up. Somebody played this one. 34 years in a classroom, Percy said. 300 and some students. The man in the hat looked at Percy. Something passed between them. Not words. Whose is it? He said. Percy told him about Iris, about the arthritis, about the $65 in 1977, about the November radiator call and the guitar in the corner and the 3 months of early mornings. He said it plainly, the way you describe facts, not the way you describe something you want credit for. The man in the hat listened without moving. Then, he said, "Can I play it when you're done?" Percy looked at him. "Be about another 20 minutes. I'll wait." He sat in the chair by the space heater. Joel had turned around at some point and was watching the man in the chair with the expression of someone trying to place a face. He looked at the hat. He looked at the ring. He looked at the bracelets. He was almost there. He was not there yet. The man in the hat looked at the guitar on the bench. His left foot was tapping something slow against the floor, barely moving. Like a clock hand you can only see if you watch it long enough. Percy worked. The shop was quiet except for the space heater clicking and the gospel radio and the sound of the tools. 22 minutes later, Percy set down the tool in his hand and looked at the Martin. He looked at it for a long time. He tuned it slowly, by ear, adjusting each peg with a patience that seemed like it could not be hurried. He carried it to the man in the chair. Here is what I want to ask before we go further. Has a piece of music ever returned something to you that you thought was gone? Not taught you something. Returned it. Write what it was in the comments. I read every one of them. The man in the hat took the guitar with both hands. He turned it over once and looked at the repaired seam. He ran one finger along the edge of the bracework through the sound hole. His thumb moved across the strings, not playing, listening. He tilted the body in the light the way you tilt a photograph to see what it's trying to show you. Then he placed it in his lap. Joel had stopped looking at the guitars on the wall. He was standing very still near the door. The first note came out of the Martin quiet and round and warm, the way the first note out of a good acoustic always sounds in a small room, like it had been waiting for permission. The man in the hat played 3 notes and paused. 3 more notes. He was not performing. He was asking the guitar a question and listening to the answer, and then asking a different question. He found a melody. It was not a song Percy recognized. It did not sound like anything from a record. It sounded like something older than records, older than the shop, older than South Main Street and the river smell and the gold February light coming through the transom. It moved through the room the way his father's playing had moved through the shop on the evenings after closing. Not asking to be listened to, just present, just real, filling the space without taking it over. Percy set down everything he was holding. The notes climbed and fell, and climbed again. The Martin's repaired top resonated the way repaired tops resonate when the work has been done right. Not perfectly, not without the evidence of its history, but fully. Every note carried the $65 and the 300 students, and the 34 years of classrooms, and the arthritis, and the 3 months of early Sunday mornings, and Oliver Lyle's unfinished parlor guitar, and Iris Beaumont's hand on Percy's hand in a moment that needed no words. All of it was in the wood. The man in the hat was just listening to it. The last note held for a long time. The room held with it. When it released, the space heater clicked. Nobody spoke. Joel had his back against the door. He had put his hands in his pockets at some point and did not remember doing it. His face had the look of someone who has had something rearranged inside without quite being able to name what it was or where it had been before. He looked at Percy. Percy was looking at his hands. The man in the hat held out the Martin. Percy took it. "The crack is gone," the man in the hat said. He meant it as a compliment. He meant it as the highest one he had. Percy nodded. He could not speak. Joel was still by the door. He said, his voice careful and small, "I'm sorry. I have to ask. Are you—" The man in the hat stood and picked up his hat from where he'd set it on the edge of the bench. He put it on. He looked at Joel. "I was in town for a show," he said. "I like to walk on Sundays. I saw the guitars in the window." He looked at the archtop on the wall. "That's yours?" he said to Percy. Percy said, "Made it." The man looked at the archtop for a long time. "It's alive," he said. "You can hear it from here." He reached into his shirt pocket. The pick was there, edges worn to the smoothness of old river stone, the corners rounded by 40 years of use. He set it on the bench next to the Martin. "Jimi Hendrix gave me that at Woodstock," he said. He was looking at Percy, not Joel. "I have one more at the hotel. A guitar that has held that many students. I think it should have a piece of that history." He paused. "Give it to Iris. Tell her it belongs with the guitar." He turned toward the door. "Wait," Joel said. He said it without thinking. The man in the hat stopped. Joel looked at the floor. His jaw worked once. I said something stupid before you came in. About Santana. A moment. You said what you believe, the man said. That's not stupid. He tilted the brim of his hat once. Beliefs are allowed to change. He opened the door. The river air came in cold and brief. He walked out into the February afternoon. The bell above the door rang once and went quiet. Joel stood in the middle of the shop for a long time without moving. Then he pulled out his phone. He looked at the screen. He put it back in his pocket without doing anything with it. He looked at Percy. That was, yes, Percy said. And I said, yes, Percy said again. Not unkindly. Joel sat down in the chair by the space heater. He sat there for a while. Percy went back to the bench. The gospel radio played. The space heater clicked. The winter light moved across the floor. After a while, Joel said, Can you teach me something? About the guitar. Just something. Percy looked at him. You play? A little. I grew up on Clapton. Percy went to the wall and took down a battered Telecaster and handed it across. He pulled his stool to the workbench. He sat down. Here's the thing about Clapton, Percy said. He was tuning the Telecaster by ear, small adjustments. Patient. He'll teach you the note. Santana will teach you the space around the note. He set the guitar in Joel's hands. Your father gave you a good place to start. Now go further. Percy Lyle called Iris Beaumont that evening. He told her the guitar was done. He told her about the morning. He told her about the pick. He told her whose pocket it had been in since 1969. Iris was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Percy, your daddy would have loved this story. Percy said, I know it. He brought the guitar to her on Tuesday. She held it in her lap for a long time before she played it. When she played it, she played the first song she had ever taught a student. A simple G chord, then a C, then a D, back to G. The progression every beginning guitarist learns, and most of them forget. She played it 3 times through, slowly, and then she stopped and pressed her palm flat against the body of the guitar and felt it ring. The pick was in a small frame on the wall above her music chair by the following Saturday. Percy had found the frame at a shop on Beale Street. He had also found, in a box at the bottom of Iris's music cabinet, a photograph of a classroom that had not been opened in years. 30 students in 3 rows, 1984. Every one of them holding a guitar. Every guitar a different size. 2 of them clearly too big for the children holding them. Iris in the back, one hand on the shoulder of a small girl in the front row, who was gripping the neck so tight her knuckles had gone pale. Percy put the photograph in the frame next to the pick. He did not ask if that was all right. Iris looked at it for a long time when she saw it. She did not say thank you. She did not need to. Percy understood. He went home and worked for 2 more hours in the shop before he turned off the lights. The archtop was still on the wall. He looked at it on his way to the door. He turned off the main light and stood in the dark, with just the light from the street coming through the window. The way the shop looked to anyone walking by at night. Warm, dim, full of shapes that meant nothing to most people, and everything to a few. He thought about what Carlos Santana had said, looking at the archtop. It's alive. You can hear it from here. Percy turned off the last light. He locked the door. He thought his father would have liked that. He thought his father would have known exactly what it meant. Joel drove back to Nashville on Monday morning. He had bought the battered Telecaster from the wall. Percy had charged him a fair price, not a low one, and Joel had not argued. He had also written his email address on a piece of paper and left it on the counter with a question about whether Percy ever took on apprentices. Percy wrote back 3 weeks later. He said he did not take on apprentices in the formal sense. He said there was work to do, some Sundays, if a person was willing to show up early and learn by watching and understand that the work itself was the lesson. He said the door was unlocked on Sundays, even when the sign said closed. Joel drove back to Memphis on the first Sunday in March. He has driven back most Sundays since. He does not talk about which guitarist is better than which other guitarist anymore. He has found that the more you understand the instrument, the less the ranking matters and the more the listening does. He is still getting there. Percy tells him he is doing fine. Percy tells him almost no one gets there on a schedule. The Martin hangs in Iris Beaumont's living room when she is not playing it, which is not often. The crack is invisible unless you know where to look. The wood on either side of the old seam has pulled together the way old repairs do. Not perfectly smooth, not seamless, but held, stronger at the break than it was before. That is what good repair work does. It does not erase what happened. It holds it together going forward. Iris plays every morning. Her arthritis is not better. She plays anyway. Some sounds are not made. They are released. On this channel, we make videos to carry what lives inside Carlos Santana's heart to the next generation. If this story moved you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Let's close with something Carlos Santana once said. People don't come to concerts to hear technique. They come to feel something that reminds them they are alive. That's the only thing worth playing for.